So we're rolling. Okay. Welcome to the Empowered Business Podcast. I'm your host, Two Eagles Marcus, Tiwa Pabloan, Native American, founder and publisher of Empowered Business Magazine and Empowered Talent Diverse Job Board. Today, I have with me former D&I practitioner turned justice seeker, Farzin Farzad, and he is the founder of Critical Equity Consulting, LLC. Welcome today, Farzin. I know I just kind of blew the intro, but that's fine. This is real life. We're just, making it happen. I discovered you on LinkedIn in my journey of I want to say my own personal journey of social justice and unracism and anti-racism and decolonization. All of these, a lot of the words and terms I was familiar with before the pandemic, but when the pandemic happened and started to happen, that really started even me as being a Native American, half white, half Native American. I've lived a life of privilege, and even myself, I've just kind of shut out. I'm like, these people are like that because of this reason, and I don't really face a lot of those problems. So I'm just gonna I just need to worry about myself right now. My life is hard enough. But when the pandemic happened, I started awareness that, I was like, I have it bad, but there's a lot of people that have it way worse. And there's people that have my bloodline on my reservation that have it tremendously bad. And I have all this knowledge that I've had the privilege, the only thing that's different for me and a relative or someone from my tribe is that I ended up in a different zip code growing up. And that was just luck of the draw, like with anyone, you get what you get. And so with that privilege I have and the knowledge I have, and I want to be able to connect diverse populations. I want to be able to be a role model for young children that could look up to me and say, hey, somebody can ask them who's a successful business person or who's a Native American that you see, or who can you look up to? And I want to be somebody they can look up to because,
Sure.
When you look at representation of Native Americans, seriously, name one Native American that you know of that's like a business person.
Business person? I don't know.
You can name an actor probably, but
yeah, new interior secretary. Musician.
Well, okay, yeah, the new interior secretary. So that's today, though.
Exactly.
The first women in Congress were 2 years ago. One of them, Deb Haaland, is from the Laguna Pueblo. I'm from my relatives are at the Taos Pueblo. I didn't grow up there, but that's where my people are. And it's an hour and a half away. So to see Deb, Auntie Debbie,
love it.
To see her, this year and have the historic 6 Native Americans in Congress. That's the most ever. And to see her representing our people and wearing the clothing from our heritage and from our ancestors and being sworn in and having her family there and seeing, the Native American people finally being represented. We haven't been citizens 100 years yet. I'll be 50 when that happens. It's another 4 years. And my tribe in particular, the Tiwa Puebloans from the Pueblo of Taos, my father and my grandfather grew up and lived, and there's still people living in it. It's a 1,000-year-old adobe structure, and it's the world's oldest continuously inhabited structure, in the world, according to the world.
Wow.
The World Heritage Organization. It's a protected landmark, and to think
very cool
that my family, my dad, my father, my grandfather, my grandmother, they lived in that. it's 1,000 years old, but we haven't been citizens for 100 years. I mean, obviously, I'm a citizen. My father was a citizen, but my grandfather wouldn't have been a citizen. And their blood is in that earth in that building. So when I think of that, and when I was younger, and I mean, even when I was younger, I'm 46. So it's been the life I've lived has just been a different life. And I didn't think about those things because for the most part, I've experienced a lot of stuff, but still it's a different world. So that was what started me. I mean, that was a long way to explain it, but in my journey of finding out more about what's happening and who are the thought leaders. And I started just looking for and seeking out D&I practitioners or diversity and inclusion people, and you're one of the people that I came across. And you have a very powerful voice. And I've been, you're one of the people I see in my feed multiple times a day, and you always have things to say that I can either relate to, or I can identify with it, or it's thought provoking, or I need to comment. Like I always have to comment on your stuff and interact because
I love it.
yeah. So you're one of the people. There's many people I follow that have big voices, but you're one of the main people. And so with all of that being said, all that talking about me, this isn't about me. This is about you. And I want to know, so just tell me about yourself. Tell me about, what made you leave the corporate world and start off on your own, and what you're doing.
Sure. So, so I guess to backtrack a little bit, I mean, I'm coming into the DEI space, I think, from a background in minority rights and advocacy. And that was basically a haphazard trajectory that sort of was fated in a way, I think. Like it coincided with like sort of my exploration into my own identity and trying to figure out where I fit. So I'm ethnically Azerbaijani from Iran. So, I'm a ethnic minority within a diaspora group, right? So, so ethnically Azerbaijani from Iran. So, I don't necessarily always kind of mesh with the greater Iranian diaspora here. And I've always had a tension with my experience and then greater American society. So, I did a lot of exploration into what that meant, and one thing led to another. I ended up kind of working in the human rights area, specifically with regards to ethnic rights in Iran, ethnic and religious rights. From there, moved into culture work, and long story short, I entered the DEI space after I did a master's program overseas in Azerbaijan. Actually, kind of this whole sort of discover myself trip out there. Came back here, started out in the higher education space, working in HR, doing diversity work for a university nearby here. Moved into corporate world, did some diversity and inclusion work for a law firm, big law. Moved to local government, where I started to kind of coax a little bit of my background and started utilizing a little bit of my background in this sort of advocacy work to kind of translate that into equity work, and not just for the organization itself, but for, what we called our customers, which was the greater community of Arlington County. So all that, years later. So this past summer, I decided to kind of take all that experience and start my own firm, Critical Equity Consulting. I chose the name very deliberately, critical coming from critical theory, critical race theory, equity coming from a much more systemic approach to dismantling this work as opposed to individualistic work. I believe in the virtue of kind of looking at systems and how they influence human behavior rather than the human behaviors themselves, which are an affect of bad or good systems. So with that in mind, I kind of took all of that sort of those themes, those like concepts that I built over time, and started my own firm. And so now things are moving along, and so I'm doing a lot of the work that I normally would be doing for a single institution, but for multiple clients, which is making me quite happy.
Now, with that work you're doing, do you find that when you are, I want to say qualifying or doing preliminary interviews with organizations, that a lot of them they'll say, hey, we want to set up a meeting, and then you go in and they're like, here's what we want you to do, and you're like, no, because they don't want you really to. They just want like optical stuff. They don't want to do like true work, like true culture change and whatever. Does that happen a lot?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of, okay. So, I mean, it's since the protests for the murder of George Floyd, I think this has been a topic that's been of interest for a lot of corporate entities. And I think, weeding out the sort of performative and check the box type of approaches versus, if anybody's interested in doing real work is something that I think everybody needs to kind of weigh a little bit. And so, luckily I have had interest from individuals that are seeking to do actual work, because I mean they look at my LinkedIn and see the posts that I'm very forward, I'm upfront, I talk about my experience, I try and amplify the experiences of others, and so you know what you're getting into with me, and in those initial conversations I'm very, very forward. I lead with discussions on race. I use conversations around race and racialization as a way to show processes of developing and sustaining systems of oppression. I introduced this concept that I've learned over time called targeted universalism. You can't paint broad brushstrokes and kind of expect everyone to benefit from a single policy or a single initiative. Sometimes you have to be very deliberate and intentional about the communities that you're looking to influence and kind of help dismantle the barriers for those communities. And so I talk about this quite a bit, and I'm not one to hold back. I mean, at times, yes, of course, I have to a little bit, hey, this is a client meeting. You're not advocating for anything right now, but I'm pretty forward, straightforward. And I think so far, so good. I haven't really, I don't know if it's people do the research and are like, yeah, not this guy.
They do. Yeah. They're like,
yeah.
Your bounce rate is massively high because they're like,
probably,
wrong one. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the clients that do end up working with you, do you find that they are already do they have diverse leadership? Are they starting from scratch, like out of nowhere, or have they been working on stuff? Like, what kind of insight do you have there?
I think it's mixed. So, I've received interest from organizations that are interested in, okay, it's time. We've been avoiding this topic for all these years, and it's really time to get something started and moving. Others are very I'm ready to drop everything and go, right? Like I'm ready to, we have a foundation a little bit, but we want to take it to the next level, right? And so we want to have really meaty conversations about systems of power and oppression and how they influence our employees and our clients, and really trying to hammer out exactly where the issues are. So it's been mixed. I think, given my background, I'm lucky to have been exposed to institutions that are in different places of their own journey into doing this work, and so I think I speak with a type of I think what I've been, told is that I speak with a certain degree of calmness and, understanding to the point where it's not threatening,
Yeah.
but I'm not also reserving anything. This is real. This is society. This is like, do away with the whole, are you politicizing things or whatever? This is reality. You can't escape this, but let's talk about it in a way and frame it into a way that we can understand it and do something. So yeah, it's mixed. Long story, but yeah.
Do you think that, I don't know what I can't remember what the term is for it, but, I know, oh shoot! Now I forgot it. What is it when you switch?
Code switching?
Yeah, code switching. So is code switching more of changing your voice? So like if you have an accent and you change it to like a white sounding accent, or is it the words, or is it the dialect? Or is it a combination of everything? Because I know that code switching has been something that I've talked to people about, and I'm just trying to get an understanding of what people think it is and what the real definition is.
Yeah, for me, I think I have a pretty inclusive definition. I mean, it's essentially changing who you are, how you communicate, the tone you use, trying to, hide your accent, trying to use words and terminology to make you fit into this dominant cultural norm. And so my approach to that is that instead of, hammering in exactly, okay, so this is code switching and this isn't code switching, the concept is you are not being your authentic self, right? Like, had I had an accent, would I be able to have that accent and kind of not use mental energy to consistently check myself to be my authentic self? And that goes to the system, the environment you're creating, right? So it's not like I'm not here to teach anybody. Of course, that's something I can do. Teach how to survive in a problematic system. Yes, I've done that before. I don't, particularly care for that. I'm trying to change the system so you can be your authentic self. Because when you're doing that type of exercise, when you're trying to consistently limit what you're saying, you can't bring your 100% self into that situation because you're consistently worried about how are people going to interpret my speech pattern, the language that I'm using, the terminology that I'm using. Is it professional? Is it elevated in these societal constructs that we've developed? Or am I going to, frankly, that this is a thought, am I going to sound stupid or look stupid, right? And so it's an issue, I think, most people face when they're kind of entered into a system that's foreign to them, that's foreign to their specific dominant culture. And so if you're othered in that situation, then yeah, you have to kind of think of ways to fit in more. But my whole approach to that is let's remove that barrier. Let's remove these ideas of what passes for professional or educated or, which sounds better and doesn't sound better. Let's break that, that system and create a kind of inclusive environment where I'm allowing people to bring themselves into that environment so they don't have to worry about all their speech to the point where their ideas are flourishing. It's about the communication is about their product, their ideas, what they're thinking, as opposed to how they're speaking. So, yeah, I think, it's for me, it's all encompassing. I think code switching. I've done it myself. Like I've been in environments where I've had to watch what I say. I grew up in PG County in Maryland, and we have a specific way of talking that I grew up and I've had to unlearn or.
What is it? I can't be that bad.
I mean, it's not bad. No, like that's the thing. It's not good or bad, right? It's just how we grew up. And so,
oh yeah, look what I said. It can't be that bad. What I mean is, just, I'm wondering how different it is, or what's different about it than what you are now. I mean, you're talking, and I'm just wondering what it would be. What did you have to unlearn?
I mean, I guess it's like kind of the pace, and just like some of the lingo that you use, and kind of the things that you say. Like, I mean, they don't translate across the rest of the country, and some things that we say, growing up, like don't really.
So like the difference between, so if somebody says soda and pop, or if you go somewhere and they say,
at the basic
"Hey, I want
level.
a Coke," and then they're like, "What kind?" And you're like, "What? A Coke?
Right.
What kind?"
Yeah. So
okay.
like, I mean, or like accent from specifically PG County, or adopting my, sometimes I would say things I notice in my father's accent, right? And then I would get embarrassed, and I'm like, why am I embarrassed at this, right? Like, this is, there's nothing particular. This is just it. It's not good or bad. It exists. The fact that if somebody were to react negatively to me saying something like that, or saying it in a using a term, or in a manner that's not jovial, or hey, what does that mean, or something like that, or it's kind of viewed negatively, that's the problem, right? Yeah. I'm concerned with creating an environment where I can be me. And
well, I just want to take it a little bit further with, so code switching in the business environment, it's a survival mechanism, but it's also, when it comes to being in the real world, it can be life or death when it comes to interactions with police. But also, let's think about it again. If white people from the United States go to other countries, they're not concerned about code switching. They just are still themselves. They're not trying to fit in. They're like, I'm a white American. Mm-hmm. That's like, so when you think of that, when you talk about how the majority of the population, then that goes into minority and majority, it's an indication of power. It's not the amount of people. And, white people will go into those countries and they don't think for 1 second that they have to code switch to survive.
Right.
They just are like, I'm here. It's me. I'm okay. So those are considerations that we have to think about.
Yeah, I mean, that's the privilege of living in a global empire, right? Like, people are watching American movies. People understand, American mannerisms. Like, it is just as we operate in whiteness here. Like, the world is operating in Americanness, white Americanness globally, right? Like, I've been to countries and they're, I'm hearing them trade sort of these like workplace concepts that I'm like, where'd you hear that? Like, that's not, first off, that's not culturally relative to you. That's very like individualistic in an extremely American sense. So, and I mean, people are like, use social media, the books that are kind of being spread out about workplace. So we are setting the tone for what the system, from the workplace to interactions with police to interactions with just greater society. We're setting that tone across the world. Like, and so I think there's some value in understanding the power of and privilege of being an American, above all things. So, that I've never been into a country where, like, I've had the things that I do questioned. Like, I mean, of course, like, people will ask about like certain things like pride, but it's not a like, like you said, it's not a life or death situation, or it's not a situation of bias or discrimination where I feel like if I'm not this way, then And people they're like, oh, he's that way because, he grew up in the US. And so, for other cultures, both here and globally, you don't get that privilege. Like there's not much exposure to your particular cultural values, your mannerisms, how you talk, how you present yourself, what you believe. That's the luxury of having society do the work for you, right? So being an American and going abroad, people know what that is. And society, I don't have to explain myself because society has done that for me. Being Middle Eastern in the United States, I have had to explain and try and get people to view me as a human being because society's not doing that for me. The media is doing the opposite, right? Mm-hmm. So I have extra work to do to fit in, or I have extra work to do to kind of to be able to be viewed as a human being in the most basic of sense. So abroad, I have privilege as an American to a certain extent. Here, I have some privileges, some marginalizations, and it's like, what's society doing for you, and what kind of barriers are society erecting against people like you? So it's a constant thought.
Okay, so when it comes to, I told you before on LinkedIn that somebody said that I was a white passing race manager, and because of my awards, program. But
no, first off, your identity is for you to define. So I wouldn't let that. I wouldn't worry about that.
Well, but people that's a thing that I think that people with darker skin have said that, because I've had conversations with friends, and it's just like people say, well, these, I have dark skin, they have light skin, or whatever it is, but there is a privilege. I mean, it's proven in societies that people will say to their kids, like, don't go out in the sun too long, you'll get too dark. And they covet lighter skin, even amongst the different races and ethnicities within their own race. So one of the things that, if you and I, compared to a lot of people, would be looked at as white passing, go, oh, you just look like a white guy, you can get through it. But the thing that you and I that have our unique differentiators is that we both have culturally significant or reflective names. So you and I could jump on a phone call with somebody and they'd be like, oh, it's just some white guys rolling in. And then all of a sudden here's two Eagles and Farzin. They're like, whoa. Like, right, so they call us and invite us down, right? Or we call them and invite it down. And then we get there and they look on the list and they're like, two Eagles and Farzin. And then we're standing there like, yeah, we just talked to you, man. And they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I have to go through a lot of, every day I'm explaining my name. Every day I have to repeat myself. I have to spell my name out when I'm on the phone. And a lot of the times depending on what it is, I'm just like, it's Marcus. If I'm ordering pizza or something, I'm like, it's Marcus. I don't want to sit there and go through all it gives me anxiety. It physically causes me, I can feel it when I say two Eagles and then they just pause for a long time.
Yeah. And I'm laughing. No, I'm laughing because I have this running joke that I'm Frank at Starbucks. So it's my convenience identity versus my authentic self. So I don't want to actually spend time to spell it out. And when I just it's a quick interaction that I need something. Which is it good or not? I don't know. I feel weird every time I do it.
Yeah.
In the back of my head, but
I'm lying to them.
Yeah, exactly. So no,
I'm not being real. I'm not keeping it real. So is convenience identity, is that a DE&I terminology thing?
I think I just made that up.
You need to figure out what it is, because that's the thing. Like, I know I've talked to other people, they do it. Like, I saw somebody on my LinkedIn feed the other day, and he had a culturally significant name for his ethnicity. And then he had the white name. It's kind of like he had Farzin or Frank.
Yeah. In parentheses,
so he made he made a nickname so it's more acceptable to Americans. And I was like, no, I told him to stick with his true name. I said, you know, be true to yourself, be proud, represent yourself. We got to do this now, because it's never going to change if we don't start, representing our heritage. And he went with that, because he had actually the second name, the nickname on his LinkedIn. But I understand and I get it. Like, it's already hard enough to get things done, and then adds another barrier to it but at the same time, I'm constantly, making my name known. I'm putting it out there. But I do have the convenience identity, which I think that's a new term you just invented that needs to be submitted into the vocabulary. The lexicon. So definitely that's something that, and there may be another term for it, but anyways,
I know. I think you hit on a very important topic of there's always this dichotomy, this duality of what do I need to do in order to survive versus what do I need to do in order to change society to reflect like better upon people like me and my people and people I identify with, right? Like, so, at times when I have considered even changing my name on resumes, because I know that people will look at my resume and see my name and automatically assume that, there's nothing wrong with this, that I'm a recent immigrant or there's something negative connotation to that. Like, the framework is always going to a point where, he's not a good culture fit, right? Because he has this foreign sounding name. And so I've actively chosen, to my own detriment, to keep my name on resumes and to be myself, like, in situations that truly matter. And I think at this point in my life, I've been able to kind of develop a platform on LinkedIn. I've brought myself to a point of privilege where I can be my true authentic self. And, even this conversation is important because, like, I can be Farzin on here and people will recognize who I am and recognize what I'm about without like automatically assuming, seeing my name and drawing up several conclusions. So there is this aspect of, if I'm coming up, like, what do I need to do to get ahead? Which is, it speaks to our system of racial capitalism in this country. And then while we're doing that, can I then, if I'm at a place where I'm comfortable, can I now be me? So it is a constant dance of, and I talk about this a lot in my trainings, like, what do privileges afford you and what do marginalizations keep you from? And so, and a lot of it is just like, there's so many things that, privilege, it's not like, you're getting handed out money all the time. It's simply for the fact that I don't have to think about this. And that in itself is energy saver, right? You're saving your mental energy for something else, for something, for the output of your labor, for what you're doing, for the advocacy work you're doing. Whereas, that takes a lot of mental energy to not be yourself, to be inauthentic, to cover, to code switch. And so for us, I think it is a constant thing. And going back to what you're saying, I fully one of the things I talk about, like, about whiteness is it's whiteness. It's good to think about in terms of privilege and access. So at times I'm white passing and white approximate. So I don't get the barriers that maybe somebody from my ethnicity but maybe have darker skin would have, or somebody who is Black, brown, or indigenous would face, right? If they're more, less white appearing than I am. And so I think I have sometimes I have a foot in this space, in the space of whiteness, and sometimes I don't. And so I think for me, that gives me a sense sometimes of, it's like, wow, I can do that. If I don't, if my name isn't an issue, if my name doesn't come up, or like I can, walk down the street, even as a man, I can walk down the pathways here in my neighborhood and not worry about any physicality issues. Like nobody's going to stalk me or anything like that. But yeah, so it's important to recognize where you fit into society. Like defining your own identity does not mean that you don't know the historical processes and societal process that got you to where you are, right? You still have to recognize, for people like us, we still have to recognize that we are part of a racial hierarchy. We're part of a gender hierarchy. We're part of a caste system that's based on all of this, and where we fit depends on the privileges and marginalizations that society has provided for us. So it is a constant thing that you're thinking about, that people that are in the higher level of this caste that don't have those marginalizations don't have to think about.
That's true. Can you explain the racial caste system that's in the United States?
Yeah, so that's a concept I'm borrowing from Isabel Wilkerson. I think that's the best way to really sort of in something that I've been using more often in my discussion. So typically, I talk about power. How is power expressed? Who has it? Who doesn't? Who's striving for it? As the source code, basically, of society. I've moved away from that to kind of talk about this caste system, which is similar to the caste system in India, in this country, whereas it's a system of power and privilege. But this caste system is embedded into every aspect of our society. So whiteness is at the very top, and then it kind of trickles into proximity to whiteness and what are the different elements of your identity that intersect to kind of put you at the lower ends of this racial hierarchy, this racial caste system that's built. So I view this caste system as the source code of America, and I view racism and all its affects as sort of the user interface, right? That's the not systemic racism, but sort of the more interpersonal interactions. They're the face of it, whereas it's this embedded sort of system. So that's why I consistently focus on equity and justice above diversity and inclusion, and that's my tagline: diversity and inclusion practitioner turned justice seeker. Because diversity and inclusion is the user interface. If you want to build a truly good system, you focus on equity, dismantling the system, right? Dismantling systems of oppression and dismantling structural racism, dismantling structural misogyny and sexism. And so, it's sort of like a misshapen pyramid, essentially. I don't know if this is true or not, but I sort of fall in the middle of this category, categorizations. There are certain privileges that I have. There's certain privileges I have as a man, of course, in any situation. Yeah. White passing. Then you get to my name, and that's a extra element kind of weighing me down. Yeah, this is a big check mark. Right. Or is it immigrant status, right? So so it's I think viewing that gives you the tools as a caste system. It gives you the tools to kind of uproot rather than focus on the affects of this caste system, right? So we talk a lot about, hey, let's be included and all these things, and which is great, but in reality, all of those things eventually trickle and fix themselves once you fix the groundwork, right? Once you do the real work to uproot systems that are disproportionately harming others and creating environments where I don't have access to certain types of education. I don't have access to, for example, even parents that understand the American system. I had extra work to do growing up because my other parents had a knowledge of how the American school system worked and the PTA meetings and all these other things. Like they were knowledgeable about at least getting that finding a way to figure out that information. Whereas I always I always felt like, oh, my parents don't know, talk to me instead. Right. Don't they wouldn't figure it out. And that didn't feel good. Right. There are a lot of these affects of these bad systems that, we got to be careful of if we're focusing on too much on the, what I'm calling the user interface rather than the source code, becomes problematic.
So equity and justice is which one's the source code and which one's the user interface?
So I think they're both. Equity and justice is sort of developing working on the system. Diversity and inclusion. Diversity kind of has a foot into building equitable systems, and inclusion is, just being included, right? But when you're talking about being included, I don't really ever talk about inclusion, I think, in my discussions, because it still has a latent impression of power. Like, I am including you. I have the power to bring you in.
To include or exclude.
Right. So, there's this famous quote, in the somewhat earlier days of diversity and inclusion by Renee Myers that said, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance, where you're still being asked to dance, right? You're not getting up and dancing on your own. There's somebody there that's bringing you in. And so I think a lot of diversity and inclusion work up until for the past 30 or some years, up until recently, we've been in this area of, let's figure out how to bring people in. Let's figure out how to, let's not accept their ideas or values, but we'll hear them out, right? And so valuing everybody in the way they need to be valued, and they want to be valued, and they want to express themselves, is important. And it is not up to me to determine what those values are so I can include you. It is up to it's not up to me. It's up to the system, right? Like, you build an equitable and inclusive system to the point where everybody can be themselves, right? And inclusion follows equity. So the source code is equity and justice, and one thing that I think was really important about those two concepts is the role of course correction. Without equity and injustice, the conversation is on equality. And equality assumes that everybody's coming from the same place, everybody has the same tools, and everybody's had the same opportunities, and we just have to value that. And if they don't have it, then tough luck. We're just going to talk to these individuals who have gone to this tier of university, have had this type of experience, and that kind of thing. And so, that is problematic, right? So not everybody has had that same sort of upbringing and educational and experiential knowledge. So it is okay to target and course correct for societal wrongs, right? This is the root of justice. It's a balance. You have to, if somebody doesn't have the Excel skills required, for example, talking off the top of my head, is that something that can be trained internally, right? If we value this individual because they have great ideas and they're really great at what they have and are missing this one thing, just because they may have been overlooked in the past, is that something we can train now, right? Is that something we can course correct for problems in the past? So that's on a micro level. On a macro level, when you're talking about sort of societally, yes, it's going to take investment into communities that have been structurally left out of access to capital, of equal housing policy, of equal policing policy and the court system. It's going to take investment to course correct those societal wrongs. We have to think of these legacies of these past issues. And so that's what I mean when I'm talking about the caste system and changing the source code and building equity and justice. I mean, bringing people in and patting yourself on the back, like, hey, we got diversity and we're hearing these people out. It's still paternalistic. You're still talking about, I got the power to do that for you, right? So it's a lot of concepts, but essentially, it's really like, as much as we can, flattening this racial hierarchy, this racial caste system in society and in our institutions and organizations.
One of the things when we're talking about, having the party and inviting someone to dance, it's like there's still that gatekeeper, and it's like, okay, well, we're gonna hire you, but you have to talk like us, and we know you can't look like us, but you still have to wear the same kind of clothes we're wearing, and it's like, that's where it comes into being to have to code switch to survive. Like, you cannot just be yourself. You cannot talk the way that you grew up talking, or you have to change your speech patterns. And, some of that is a thing that's done in business. Like, obviously when you're hanging out with your friends or whatever, you're going to talk differently about stuff than when you're at work. And I don't think that, necessarily, it depends on what kind of job you have, because there's an expectation on professionalism and communication. And so there is a bit of just, that transforming to just meet the particular system, but then, or environment. But then, if you look at, like, one of the things I like to think about is, for many years, or however many years, we've done international business with so many organizations, so many, like, whether it's Japanese, African, whatever culture that white Americans have done business overseas. And when it comes to that, I know that these businesses aren't like, whoa, you guys need to get to our level. There has to be the level of the product quality, but they're not tone checking somebody from a different country. They're not like regulating hairstyles. They're not like, oh, I was going to do business with you, but you're wearing a culturally significant hairstyle. And that's not acceptable in the United States. Because that's the stuff that happens now. You have people that are literally not getting jobs because they're wearing braided hair, or because they're wearing their natural curly afro hair. Right. They're being told that they need to straighten it, or they need to, adopt a hairstyle that's more professional, meaning it needs to fit a European beauty standard. Yeah. Or beards. I've never had problems with a beard, but I've never, when I was working for people, I didn't have a beard. I was a young kid. That's the thing too, is like, obviously I think that when it comes to, this is one of my assumptions, I'm just making this up, but for instance, you now with your own company, you have the freedom to decide who you're going to work with and not accept clients that aren't going to work up to what your level, like you get to qualify clients. They don't qualify you now. And what I mean is, when you were working at an organization as part of a corporation, like, you had your limits of what you could do. They would define what you were able to do. And if you were going too far, they're like, no, that's too much. You're doing too much. We don't want it like that. We just want it to look like we're doing some stuff, but we don't want real cultural change, or we don't want real policy change. Yeah.
Why would you, right? If you're like, if the system benefits you to a degree where you're comfortable, like, getting outside of that is like no matter who you are, if you're from a dominant power norm or system, like or a culture, what you view as an encroaching culture is a threat, right? I have to now learn this to get ahead, and so that's been the problem of society up until this point. Now we're finally learning that that's problematic, and so going back to what you were saying, like those who build a workplace culture or a societal culture, or, over time, they imprint themselves onto that system, right? Like, no matter if you're doing it consciously or subconsciously, the values that you're creating are going to reflect things that you relate to, no matter who you are, right? And so that's something we have to actively combat. So, like, up until recently, I want to even say, like, we're still in this situation. The dominant cultural norm is whiteness and white supremacy in America and in our institutions. And is that because we have Nazis at the top of the C-suite? No, it's because it's, there could be, yes. I'm not saying there aren't.
Yeah.
But the concept of white supremacy, I think, is even more sinister than that, because it's not something you can really grasp. Like with somebody that's an avowed white nationalist or any sort of nationalist in their home country, you can say, oh, this is what this person's about. But the sinister thing about white supremacy is that it's pervaded everything. So including the culture, including the values of that particular work environment or culture or society or whatever. And so everything that, like all the outward affects are rooted in that source code of racial hierarchy, that white supremacist system. And so everything relates back to that. So I have to code switch to fit that norm. And so if you've been high, if almost like a royal family, right? If you're at the top of the chain and somebody's challenging your, the values that you hold, which have always been keeping you at the top, you're going to feel threatened and you're going to react. And so it is the responsibility then of those people at the top to be like, okay, now I have had all of this power. I have a responsibility to break this system that's disproportionately privileged me and disproportionately benefited me, to make sure that everybody has the same. I'm going to use the term opportunity, but that's also a little bit flawed. The same ability to get where I am, right? And even so, like, just like the hierarchy itself is problem. Like, we don't want to swap out the hierarchy for different people. Like, we want to break the hierarchy. We want to break this dominant cultural framework. Going back to what you were saying about representation, like, we have to really, really be careful. So if you have, for example, indigenous representation in government, the fact that they're there is, yes, very, very important, but is the system allowing them to be who they are and allowing them to dismantle the problems affecting those communities, right? So if we have, like, if we have a Black president, were we able to dismantle the system of white supremacy under Barack Obama because he was at the top? No, the system fights back. The system perpetuates itself. We can swap out the levers of who controls the power, but so long, and that's the diversity part of it. And diversity is great, but diversity in all of this stuff is meaningless without justice. Representation is essentially meaningless. I mean, there is some value to it, but for the most part, it's meaningless without justice. You have to break this system of dominance and subordination and these caste systems and these hierarchies that are consistently weighing on us. It would feel great for somebody like me to have somebody who's an ethnic Azerbaijani from Iran in Congress, or as the president of the United States, or even in the music industry or the acting world. But what are they able to do? Can they be themselves and pave the way for others? Or is the system so inherently limiting to them that it's always going back to this dominant framework?
That reminds me of Aziz Ansari. And he was talking about how he was on a movie poster, and it was like him and two white people. And he said, it's okay for one of us to be on here, but if one more Indian is on the poster, all of a sudden it's an Indian movie. Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's funny. Like, you still have to,
cater to whiteness.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, Like you couldn't be a traditional.
Whoa, hold up. Pump the brakes. I did not research the proper pronunciation of Azerbaijani, and I apologize for that. It was totally embarrassing, but I wanted to make sure I corrected it in the editing. So it's corrected. Again, my apologies.
Azerbaijani, yeah.
A person and then come out with an accent and like really culturally with it. You'd have to be like the whitewashed version.
Exactly.
Where your background was from there. Maybe your name was kind of like that, but you probably changed it a little bit to be a little more white. So you couldn't really be your authentic self. And I think that it's a very, very long process for us to get to those kind of points. But what we can do is just fight the good fight now and just be a part of the long-term change for our future relatives. We're the ancestors of our future relatives.
Right.
So tomorrow I am taking a Grand Rapids Chamber. They have a course that's put on by the Virtual Institute for Healing Racism tomorrow, and I'm going to be participating in an all day. What is it? Race and it says, when was the last time you had an honest conversation about race with a diverse group of people? And then it's an all day training. So there's things that I'm going to learn tonight when I read some of the materials, and then I get to spend all day. I don't really know what to expect, but this is like my first official actual like class and learning. I've read some of the books I've read lately is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I also read Weapons of Math Destruction, which talks about the biases in mathematical systems and algorithms. And that was extremely eye-opening. Like when you look at the inherent biases that are put into formulas because of people that are in privilege, only think about what, they're like, oh, everybody has an iPhone, or, all these different things where you don't think that there are people that don't have access to stuff, or even for when you think about when it comes to race and a job, that if one particular race isn't showing up on time, you're like, oh, they're a bad employee, and it's because they're this color or this ethnicity, because they're not showing up on time. So they clearly don't care about this job, so they get fired. Well, then when you dig deeper and you find out that particular ethnicity is most of them live in poverty in this community, and they have to ride the bus. So they have to make 5 transfers and spend an hour just to get to work. And that's why they're late. If they make one false move, then they don't get to the job on time. And that matters, but you don't know that because you have a car and you just think that, oh, they're just lazy and not setting their alarm and not getting in their car on time consistently. But that's not it. Yeah. Because you don't experience that. You've never experienced it. And there's so many other examples of those kind of systems that are created that if you don't have the perspectives of other people that have had the lived experience of it, then you won't be able to create the systems that are accurate.
Yeah. And, a lot of the time, to add to what you're saying, a lot of the time it's like we're so wrapped up in our own struggle that, we think, okay, it's tough. We're powering through it. We're doing what we can to survive. And then that sort of unawareness sort of kind of comes out of that privilege. So like, when we're starting from a different area or starting from a different, you have the race analogy where some people have more hurdles. When you have less hurdles, you're still experiencing hurdles to get where you need to go. And you're so focused on those hurdles that you can't just look over and say, wow, there's all these systemic barriers. And to celebrate, hey, the fact that you're here and you're alive and you're surviving and you're able to be where you are itself is a true miracle. But is that something good? Is that a virtue? I don't know. I mean, it's good for them, that individual, but the fact that that exists, like that's BS. We got to clear that path. And so I think, like, to your point, like, you get to a point where, you fight and you make it, and then you have this, I mean, we call them blind spots, but it's a problematic term. I usually use the term unawareness of our own power and privilege, because we know we had to fight a little bit, right? I mean, it's not and that kind of shuts us off to other people's fight and other people's, like, kind of struggles to get where they are. And so when you make it to that level, and you're able to imprint yourself, and, like you were saying, even down to the most minute detail of, like, the technology, like, we're imprinting yourself onto the technology, literally, like, you don't think about those things because they never happen to you. You have to actively know about all of these different hurdles that exist for this person to be able to understand it. And that's why I don't want to negate the value of diversity, right? The value of inclusion. It is extremely important, but again, we have to create an environment where those individuals from those backgrounds who have lived experience in those spaces, that have had to struggle and know what it's like to struggle, bring themselves to that authentic selves, and are able to talk about those experiences authentically to be able to create better outcomes and better products, right? So, forcing somebody into the top, and then they have had to become an able-bodied, white, wealthy male, which is the dominant framework here, to be able to do that is not the way to go. You have to allow that individual to be able to speak to their particular struggles, those hurdles, and be able to do something about it. And so when we're imprinting ourselves into the culture, into the products that we're creating, it's going to happen. But the more we democratize and the more we flatten that, the more people from different backgrounds will have opportunities to create products and cultures that are more reflective of broader society, of an aggregate culture, of an inclusive culture, rather than the dominant framework. Otherwise, you're going to have hair products that only for blonde hair, or like different products that are catered to certain individuals that aren't catered to others, like foods, for example. Like, so authenticity and justice and equity are very, very important to the diversity stuff. So
now, if so I'm taking this class tomorrow. It's 8 to 5. I've read a couple of books. And I spend more time, like I said, I've added a lot. Well, I don't think I said it, but I've added a lot of D&I practitioners and advocates and social justice advocates on my LinkedIn connections. I started following more organizations that are into social justice, like the organizations themselves, because I wanted to become more aware of what organizations are up to, what I can learn, what are people talking about, why is it important, what are their perspectives, and that's how I've been working on my own personal journey of becoming more empathetic and becoming more aware of what's happening and how I can help and how I can participate in things that I've been doing wrong myself, even though we all have our own levels of privilege and experience, and no matter how much we learn, we're still going to say things that are wrong or be insensitive or not think things through. And but that is why I'm part of, in my learning, I have to unlearn. Mm-hmm. And I think that learning is easier than unlearning. Yeah. Now, what do you have trainings or books or PDFs or anything that our audience could access or download or purchase from you where they could start to learn more?
So not yet. I'm working on some materials. if you go to criticalequity.com, there's a resources tab where I'm going to, I have a few resources up. You can watch a webinar that I did recently. There's some things coming up in the pipeline that I'll be putting up once they're ready and published. If you're interested in any type of training from, just foundational concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion to inclusive leadership to, respect in the workplace with a DEI focus to conversations around anti-racism. You can reach out to, you can do through the website, or you can reach out to contact@criticalequity.com to kind of get a sense for what I do and what I can offer. But there's more to come. So it's still like, critical equity is still kind of in its infancy. We haven't been around for a year yet. And so we're still like kind of putting together some more materials, but those will definitely be coming up over the next few months. So
yeah,
I'd sure to upload them.
We're connected on LinkedIn, so I get to get little bits of your thought process, your experience, your thought leadership on the subject, and also your perspective on current events and even your live reactions to other people, to other people's comment. I mean, I can't think of one in particular, but I know I've seen you, dress people down before because of what they're saying on someone else's comment, or you posted a status based on something you saw that I saw, and I was like, yeah, I saw that. And because there's so many people, white people, that tries to gaslight us and tell us that we're overreacting, or we're angry, or we must have had a bad day, or whatever the litany of things that they're trying to explain away our lived experiences or what we experience. And just it's frustrating. But I'm glad to see that people are becoming more vocal, and it is strange to see though. Same. All these different people that will, when the we have racist or systemic racism is everywhere, and when we try to point out injustices, all of a sudden we're negative, we're the bad guy, we're getting persecuted for pointing out what's wrong. But that's part of white supremacy, doing anything to protect white supremacy, is that
right.
It's the gaslighting that comes like you're crazy, you're overacting, you're negative, you're a racist. Like when you address racism, all of a sudden they call you a racist. Like, well, that was racist.
Yeah. It's funny because you mentioned that, because there have been like most recently in some of my posts, because I think a few people have shared them, like, people kind of see it on LinkedIn and stuff. And I've had like literal messages like, you are an actual racist, when I'm calling out not even an individual, right? I'm calling out a system. And to be called a racist when you're calling out a system is particularly interesting. But yeah, I think, I think going back to what we were saying, the more people are vocal, the more people are authentic, the more people that are able to kind of speak to these and cut off the nonsense, the more it paves the way for others to do so. So you at one point you reach a critical mass when you're able to kind of change this system. And that requires people it takes some risk to do that. But the idea is to diffuse this risk across society, this pain across society. So we're doing it en masse. And so the more people are, like I see on LinkedIn, kind of commenting, and it's almost like you're thinking about it in terms of, like in medicine, it's like a sort of anti-racist antibodies, right? Like somebody says something and then 5 or 6 people are like, this is why this is wrong on this level. This is wrong on that level. You're forgetting this and that. And so the more people are kind of, latching on and saying, the more it becomes like socially unacceptable to say racist things and gaslight. Yeah. And so like, I think LinkedIn is slowly transforming into something beautiful. I mean, I know for a fact that there are people who have been like kind of shut down for what they're saying, and it had nothing to do with like it was zero harm. It was just for the fact that they were calling out racism, particularly women of color and Black women on racism. Black women talking about racism on LinkedIn have been, if my friends have been, censored. But we will eventually reach a point where we don't have these people that are being like, I mean, I can't even think of a better term, but martyred for the cause, right? Like they're the heroes that everybody's looking for, and we're putting these individuals on these pedestals, and that the scope is on them to lead us. And so like it's a lot to ask of somebody who's being simultaneously marginalized in a society and have to break free of that personally and lead people to break free of it. So the more we can diffuse this responsibility, this pain, this sort of risk in speaking out, the more people speak out, the more people kind of talk about their specific experiences, the more it's going to become like the shift is going to be from taboo to talk about these things on LinkedIn to the taboo is to like speak out against these personal experiences, against these like racist experiences that, some of these individuals that are doing problematically on LinkedIn and calling out racism a racist and those types of gaslighting behaviors. So I think it will get there. Well, right now it's certain individuals that, my friends are taking the brunt of it. Especially, I mean, it's especially like problematic for women of color on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I mean, just like reading some of the comments on some of my friends' posts, they're like, report that, but LinkedIn doesn't do anything. So,
oh yeah, I've seen those. I've been there, and I've seen those disgusting posts, and I can't believe that I can't believe that people say that stuff. I can't believe they use. First of all, I can't believe they say it. Second of all, I can't believe they use their professional LinkedIn account to say it. Like they think
that's privilege right there.
I know. They think
that is the paragon of like the fact that you have no worry about accountability.
Exactly.
No worry to be able to do that.
Professional profile, and they're just like saying that wacko stuff. And so we're going to wrap it up here. It's been an amazing conversation, Farzin. I really appreciate your time today, but I have two things to ask you before we get off. The first thing is, who are 3 voices on LinkedIn or more, if you can name them off, that people should be following besides yourself, of course, and me, because that'd be 2.
Yeah. So 2, there's 2 right here, definitely.
Yeah, we got those 2 down.
I think, one goes without saying, Madison Butler. I think,
oh yeah,
she posts a lot of great stuff. Oh man, there's so many. I can't, let me think about this.
Okay. Who I just found out about, and then it was right before that you posted something by her, and she's amazing, and I'm probably going to butcher her name. So I hope she forgives me if I do. Dr. Shola. Okay, hold up, pump your brakes again. I have a lot of these moments because I don't always get it right, and I want to make sure that I do not disrespect someone's name. And I wasn't expecting to reference Dr. Shola Moshagbamimu, but I did, and I really said it wrong, and I wanted to make sure that I always put respect on someone's name. So Dr. Shola Moshagbamimu, I am sorry. And I hope everyone can forgive me, but that's the correct pronunciation. And she has the TikTok, and she's from London, England.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That video was absolutely incredible. So she was talking about like the same things I think we were talking about, and like how calling out anti-racism and reverse racism, and how just absolutely ludicrous it all is if you look at the actual trajectory of like society and history. So she's great. One person that's not on LinkedIn that I absolutely love is Francesca Ramsey. She's got a Twitter profile. She's on the show Superstore right now. And if you haven't seen the latest episode of Superstore, and it's particularly hilarious if you're in the DEI space. It kind of goes through all the problems of a diversity and inclusion program that they did, that they kind of translated into the Superstore that they work at. It was absolutely hilarious. God, I follow, for example, somebody that's connected with Madison Butler, Emily Weltman, posts a lot of great stuff. Patrice Palmer has awesome things. She posts a lot of visuals with her commentary. There's so many. Tara Furiani, who is not the HR lady. She posts a lot of great things. I think she's gonna. She has a watch party coming up for her latest episode of one of her podcasts that she's doing. There are some people in other outside of the United States that I follow that are doing some incredible work in for example, the Netherlands. Like, I want to be sure that I will get her last name. Netherlands, Australia, UK, like her one particular person that's doing a lot of work in the DEI space that I've been in contact is Zoe. I don't want to also butcher her last name. She's half Greek, so it's Papai Konomu, which I recently had a conversation, and we were comparing and contrasting the experience of DEI work in the Netherlands and what's happening here. And there's a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of actually like very interesting things that are going on.
Shireen Daniels, the HR conversationalist.
Absolutely.
I think we follow like almost all the same people. I need to make a hard list of those so I can reference them more often.
Yeah, so Zoe Moore, she goes by Zoe, but her full name is Charika Zoe Moore on LinkedIn. I have actually another sort of talk with her that'll be posted, and you know, she and I comment a lot on each other's posts, and I follow a lot of what she's saying, and she follows, and so she does a lot of work in the advertising space, the event planning space with DEI, and that has a lot of great. I mean, that's a hard question. Like, maybe like I invite everybody to follow me and just like see who I'm sharing. How about that?
You gave me 8, so we met the
3, the quota.
Yeah, we met the goal, and there was a lot of great. You know, Madison. I love her.
Amber Thompson with Leaders of Change. Sorry, I can go on forever. But yeah, plenty.
All right, we need to save some people for the next interview, okay? Some names for the next time we talk.
Well, no, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much to Eagles. I mean, I always enjoy this is the first time we've got a chance to actually talk in person or like vocally, but I always enjoy your comments, and I love what you're posting. I love what you're doing. I love the Empowered podcast, and it's awesome. And I want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart for inviting me. This was a great conversation, and I love especially the sort of conversation on being sort of white passing in very uncomfortable situations, and so it's hard to talk. Like to admit for me, like, about my name, and like, I know, for me to admit that I like make a secret name so I can just order a pizza or, but I'm all like social justice, be yourself. But it's like, I just want to order a pizza. I don't want to get into this like feeling like crap because they're like, what? It's like that literally, when I call someone, I say 2 Eagles and they pause. I know exactly what's happening. And I know other people I've talked to, and they've said it too. Like, they've said stuff to me that's exactly the same stuff that's been said to me, and they've experienced it. And then to talk to someone that's had that experience, and I don't feel like such a,
I mean, having the name Two Eagles, it's like out there for people to get, they don't get it. I mean, and even I've had Native Americans, a lot of Native Americans will call me Marcus. And I'm like, are you insane? I just told you my name is Two Eagles Marcus. I'm not Bond, James Bond. You know, I don't go around introducing myself last name first, but, so it's like, I deal with it all the time, and it's interesting to see, even when I talk to D&I consultants, and I'll be like, Two Eagles Marcus, and I'll be like, okay, Marcus. And I'm like, dude, you're like supposed to be trained in this. What are you doing?
Right. No, I hear you. I mean, so that's got to be tough. And, you know, it all, you know, our identities, there's a very strong performative element to who we are, like who we want to express in our identity. And that has to be on our terms always. Like my identity is for me to define, right? Like, of course, I always know that, you know, I contextualize everything within society and history and, you know, where, like, you know, within my privilege and marginalization, but how I express myself, that's for me. Right. And it, you know, respect comes in the form of, are you going to respect who I am and who I want to perform and who I want to be outwardly? And are you allowing me to be my authentic self? Well, allowing is like, you know, stupid terminology because it's not up to them, but still, like you're creating an environment where I can be me, you know,
and not feel like like if you are yourself, then you'll be ostracized for it or treated differently or not asked to come back because you're yourself. But I've been in those situations where it's like, I'm surrounded by people that I know are like, they're all like rich and white. And then I realize like, hey, they're all here, but I'm here because I'm working.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even though I'm talking to them, like as a photographer or as whatever, but I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm only here because I own a magazine and I'm the photographer. I'm taking pictures for my magazine. Like if I didn't have that to bring to the table, I wouldn't be at this event.
Yeah. Oof,
so I mean, that's like, I mean, seriously, when you look around, when I'm at an event, at one time I also have a photo booth company and I was taking pictures because I also have a magazine, and Megan was working the photo booth for me, and Megan is Black and Japanese, and she is in goes a lot of different events and the social circles I'm in for for the most part. And I said, we were at an event and I said, hey, you know, look, it is actually kind of diverse tonight. And I'm like looking around and she goes, well, Two Eagles, they're all working. And then I realized I'm like looking closer and they're like the wait staff and they're like doing stuff at the thing. And then when it came to diversity of actual people that bought tickets that were there, then it was like nothing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I'm like, oh yeah. And I'm working too.
And then you're in the awkward position of dreaming, right? Like, will I ever be here? Will I ever like, you know, do I want?
Yeah. Do I really want this? But, so then at that point you start telling yourself that you don't really want that just because you know that you'll never,
I'll never. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole like conversation on its own of like, you know, the wealth in society and what it gets you and what you're able to do. And for the rest of us kind of clawing our way up and trying, like, do we want to claw our way up or do we
I know.
We just want to live comfortably? What are we
clawing our way up to?
Yeah. So.
Well, that's so we can make our voices louder and help more people. That's what we're clawing our way up to.
Absolutely. I mean, the platform I think you get with that comes with power and wealth is important. But that's not for. I mean, that may be for some others. That's not really not for me. I think I enjoy just. I mean, I want to break free of the few privileges that I have, the few marginalizations that I have. And kind of just live comfortably, but sometimes for some people, like, you have to achieve those lengths to be able to be heard. Like, it's unfortunate. We got to create a society where we don't have to be at that position to have a voice in society, right? Like, that's a big conversation on its own.
Yeah, we'll have to bring that back on a different conversation. Okay, so this is the final wrap up, Farzin. Thank you so much for joining me today. You've been amazing.
I had a great time. No, I appreciate it.
I look forward to talking to you again, and I'll definitely see you on LinkedIn.
Definitely. Sounds good. All right. Take care. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Two Eagles Marcus, founder of EmpoweredX, Empowered Business and Empowered Talent. If you haven't already, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on the EmpoweredX channel to get weekly access to the BIPOC action takers and change makers in business, entrepreneurship, and social justice. Remember, there is no community without unity, and it is essential that we all work together to ensure a prosperous and sustainable future. Stay strong, never stop learning, and never stop moving forward.